Hello everyone, it's very nice to see you here in Kumu Art Museum. Today we have planned a discussion panel on the topic of decoloniality and art historical alliances in Eastern Europe. We have 4 participants. So the participants will be Kateryna Botanova, a Basel-based cultural critic, curator and writer from Kiev, Margaret Tali, an art historian, cultural theorist and lecturer at the Estonian Academy of Arts. Then here in the yellow we have Anna Łazar, a curator of the Ukrainian and international program Free Word in Gdańsk, the capital of literature. And the panel will be moderated by Ieva Astahovska, who is a Latvian scholar, critic and curator. And this event is part of this exhibition's public program, Futura Ukraine and Avant-Garde. And now I will give the floor to our moderator, Ieva Astahovska.
Thank you, Brigitte, for inviting and putting this event together. So yeah, as mentioned, my name is Ieva Astahovska. I'm actually working at the Latvian Center for Contemporary Arts, and somehow I was very surprised, but also very glad receiving the invitation to moderate this event, because as the title of our discussion is Decoloniality and Art Historical Alliances in Eastern Europe, I somehow feel that this is, of course, very nicely to discuss the questions which are like work in progress already. And I want to mention that we have very close collaboration with Margaret Tali, who is one of the panelists here. And already since 2013, we are working on a project titled Communicating Difficult Pasts. And it's been including several events, and also next year in Tallinn, there will be continuation of this project, namely the exhibition Difficult Past Connected Worlds, which has been up to now been shown already in Riga and in Vilnius. And it's a research-based project which involves a lot of collaborations between artists, scholars, anthropologists, historians, and really has this transdisciplinary ground. And with Anna and also with Kateryna, we also have been collaborating, namely through the project which has been discussing and reflecting on post-socialist and post-colonial questions. And when the full-scale war started in Ukraine, we also organized a panel discussion online about how artists and art institutions deal with questions of both the coloniality, but also these political urgencies. And also Kateryna was one of the participants in these discussions. So I'm very happy that these alliances, in a way, and collaborations continue also through this project, through this discussion. And yeah, I still would like to say a few kind of introductory thoughts, and then we'll focus on questions. And also putting the title Decoloniality and Art Historical Alliances in Eastern Europe, in a way, it has these all keywords: decoloniality, alliances, Eastern Europe, which, of course, in a way, also are represented or somehow are very like a red thread also in this exhibition, having this very important Ukrainian avant-garde heritage here in Kumu, and also, as Elnara also already mentioned in our short tour, that it had almost like personal impulse why to show Ukrainian avant-garde in Estonia. As museum director, so managed to see the exhibition in Kiev, and really was struck by this amazing artworks, which we not necessarily know as art history, because we are used to hear about great Russian culture, and very often artists which we know as great Russian artists have actually different origins, and hence this in a way sometimes it's used almost like a buzzword, this word decoloniality, But especially with the full-scale war in Ukraine, this word has been much more applied to also our region, post-socialist region, Eastern European region. And in a way, it's used also so actively because it's not inviting not to just think about or to reflect about these very complicated legacies we actually all have here in Eastern Europe and post-Soviet, post-socialist territories, but try to really also act. And also, of course, this exhibition is a matter of act, not just reflection. And that's also, in a way, is step forward when we in also this cultural context when there's a lot of discussion about imperial legacies and the consequences, but in this case it's not just like reflection about this destiny we have as Eastern Europeans, but also invitation to think how we can change this. These destinies, and of course it's also includes a lot of questions or issues related to belonging, identity, history, memory, and how it correlates with contemporary realities, especially in the light of the current war. And even if both the exhibition and also this emergency relates to Ukraine, we all also kind of understand that this is much broader concern about this imperial legacies we all still face, so namely to post-Soviet and Eastern European region and its complex, also even sometimes borders or territories, because they have been always shifting and changing. And at the same time also this question of decoloniality invites or somehow makes these red flags how not to simplify the neither history nor the current realities, and not simplify the territory of Eastern Europe, where even when we try to have like comparative look, there's always also a very deep and essential differences still, which are based on this locally specific context. And then, of course, as we are in the art museum and an exhibition about 20th century, early 20th century art avant-garde, not just art, visual, not just art, but also, as we see in the exhibition, also literature, theater, film context is here. But in a way, it's already like much more professional field, not just culture very broadly. And therefore, I would also like to bring into our discussion more specifically these art historical terms or notions and reflection. And one that comes into mind is horizontal art histories, which is this term suggested by seminal art scholar Piotr Piotrowski, who was actually as he passed away already. I think it's maybe 10 years, and the situation was pretty different when he was writing his seminal text. And I just like rereading some of them, understand that he was pretty critical about post-colonial that application of post-colonial theories to Eastern Europe, saying that exactly like this horizontal art histories, which is talking more about this multiplicity of different realities which seek for solidarities and comparative perspective might be more essential, and how these ideas look today. It's also, of course, a matter of discussion. So my first question, which I would like to ask to all of you, and I know, Anna, you've been also not just dealing with arts, but also like currently you're very much related also with literature scene. And Kateryna, you're also like as a cultural critic, you probably deal not just with visual arts and art histories, And the same actually about Margaret. So this question about the decoloniality, would you consider this perspective, which is like, as I very briefly put, that this is not just like reflection, but also invitation to bring into action, as a really like, but on the other hand, it has been developed in a completely different part of the world, and even having also like very leftist ideas behind it, which is becomes very complicated when we apply it to the Eastern Europe. Would you see this perspective as really practical and lasting use, both in context of current emergencies, if we can say so, but also if we try to think beyond it? And could you also maybe bring some, if you have some examples in mind where you would see where it works or maybe it does not work? I don't know, maybe we can start this, Kateryna.
Thank you very much for asking this incredibly large cloud of questions. It gives me hope that we will have a very interesting and maybe sometimes a bit theoretical, maybe sometimes not, discussion today. And I am really very honestly grateful to the organizers and to Kumu Museum, not just for organizing this event, but for having this exhibition. The fact that the exhibition from Kiev dedicated to Ukrainian modernism, to Ukrainian futurism can be shown in Estonia today, I mean, in the context that we're living in, I think is of extreme importance as a sign of very kind of, real solidarity, like, as a gesture, as an act, as of bringing exhibition here, but also as an act of symbolic solidarity, of joining this effort of the Ukrainian side to rethink art history, in particular, art history of, avant-garde or modernism in general, and try to detach it from this overarching notion of, Russian art and Russian avant-garde, and see what is actually there underneath this very shiny cover, which is so easy to use, which has been used by Western art institutions, until the very, very recent. So this is my really, really sheer gratitude to the organizers and to the museums, to the museum. Two little notes on the side before I come to the decolonization, which I wanted to bring our attention to. One is that we're talking, and we were listening to the music by Ukrainian composers, still to the sound of a broken glass from this video installation in the other room. And those who saw the exhibition, that this video installation is about the history of the artistic house in Kharkiv, which is connected to this Ukrainian destroyed Renaissance, to the writers and artists and actors, to the cultural elite, let's say, of the 1920s, which was exterminated. And the sound of broken glass brings us to the moment that this history is, in a very sad and paradoxical twist, is being repeated now, when people and buildings and culture and context and history is being physically destroyed. And I think the fact that we have this sound should also remind us as uncomfortable as it is, as uncomfortable and annoying as it can be, especially being kind of outside of Ukraine or maybe not even connected to Ukraine at all, to have this buzz of news every day about another attack, another dead people, another ruined city. This is happening, and we cannot get away from it. We have to do what we can do, and probably everything we can do, to end this war, whatever it means for everybody of us. And I do think that we can do quite a lot, even maybe not the not the radical final sort of a winning move, but we still can do a lot. And another little note which I wanted to bring also to kind of the context that for me it's a panel discussion day, because this morning I was in Zoom online to the real physical discussion which was happening today, this morning in Lviv, because in Lviv there is a final day of Congress of Culture. It's a yearly event which brings to Lviv cultural actors and thinkers from different parts of Ukraine to think, to reflect about the challenges of today and about sort of Ukrainian future. And the panel I was participating this morning was about the solidarities and the possibility of finding a dialogue over the topic of decolonization with a, sorry to say, so-called global South. So the fact that in one day, at least for me personally, two discussions came together. How to think about decoloniality as a ground of finding understanding, and also maybe sometimes misunderstanding, because it's also important, and for seeing the differences of experience, but also certain similarities of experience with a very faraway context like South America or Africa, for example, or a very nearby context as you know, Central Eastern Europe, or the Baltic states in particular, because we share the legacy of the Soviet Union, the history of the Soviet Union, part of it. I think it means that this question of how we talk about our present, because coloniality is very much about present, not only about the past, and how in this present we think about joining our thinking and our acting into imagining a different world. And now, in a little loop back to the exhibition, I think that trying to imagine and trying to see Ukrainian modernism as not just something different from Russian modernism, because it's been said and written by many researchers, many Ukrainian researchers, also at the same time as this exhibition is happening in Tallinn, exhibition called In the Eye of a Storm, Ukrainian Modernism 900-930, which opened last year in Spain in Museum Thyssen-Bornemisza, and now is in Köln, in Museum Ludwig. The curators of that exhibition are talking about the fact that it's not about the radical difference of Russian and Ukrainian modernism, not at all. Because at a certain moment it's hard really to distinguish, but that's not the question. The question is that when we talk about the Russian modernism, it unifies and simplifies everything. And basically the history of Russian modernism is being written through the eyes of Moscow and Petrograd, Leningrad, St. Petersburg. When we talk about Ukrainian futurism and Ukrainian modernism, the question there is not to put a tag, and say, okay, this is a Ukrainian artist and that is a Ukrainian artist. The question there is to see how complex that history was, how those artists, visual artists, but also writers and filmmakers and architects, how much they were connected to each other through the, different hubs you see here at Kiev, there's Kharkiv, there is Kherson, how those connections to the locality and the history of this locality, you can read and see here a lot about folk art, about the influence of folk art and a tradition, how those interconnectedness influence the artists, their work, and this whole phenomenon of modernism, that it's so heterogeneous, it's so complex, it's all so connected to people and histories and localities. And that's where I think decoloniality comes in, because the notion of decoloniality as something originated in South America in 1990s, and then being kind of rethought and brought over to, to Africa, for example, and down to Central Eastern Europe, the core of idea of decoloniality is about knowledge and imagining of ourselves, how we see our histories being written, how we see the knowledge being constructed, our thinking about the world and about ourselves as a history written somewhere else by big civilizations, not just in Moscow, but by the West in general? Or are we trying, especially today, to think and understand ourselves as an important part of a history? Can we see the history written also, from Ukraine, not only from Kiev? The good thing about this exhibition and Kiev. You're correcting my Ukrainian, right? So from Kiev, but you see also here in this exhibition and the other exhibition which I mentioned, which is dedicated to Ukrainian modernism, that Ukrainian modernism is being seen and written through Odessa, Kharkiv, Kherson, Kyiv, but also, which is not here, but which is also an important part of Ukrainian modernism, but not as a part of the former Russian Empire, is also Lviv, for example, right? Where also a very important knot of a modernistic movement was happening at the beginning of 20th century. So this heterogeneity, these different localities, which are at the same time very connected to each other, and in the same time with the different other parts of Europe, right? It was Paris, there's Rome, there is Moscow, and yet Petrograd, Leningrad, St. Petersburg. This makes the history of art, but also the history of societies, very different, much richer, much more complicated, much more complex, much more embodied also. And that's, for the moment, my answer to your question about decoloniality.
Yeah, maybe Anna, you can.
Thank you. You are right. Kateryna Botanova is Ukrainian native. I am only the Ukrainian philologist. But flying here from Warsaw, I was reading The Economist, and there was Kyiv all over. So I think that we should also try to force ourselves to change our habits in naming Ukrainian cities. And I am the last one who would say that you don't remember that Kyiv is Kyiv. Thank you very much for the invitation to this great panel discussion. It's an honor for me. And I am really very happy that I have a chance to visit Kumu Museum with this great exhibition. When I was a student of art history in Warsaw University, we had some program together with Estonian artists. And I remember that our first step was here into Kumu. And I was late today a bit for this great private tour for the exhibition. I thank you once more for this moment, because I couldn't stop myself for quick checking how the Estonian exhibition looks like. And it was really like important experience for me, because when I took a look at your calendarium, I understood that there are so many interesting points in history that are common for us. Of course, they are common because we are in post-communist, post-socialist bloc. Estonia, Litva, and Latva are like post-communist and already in European Union. Poland is post-socialist, and also in European Union, Ukraine is fighting with Russia. This is the first experience, but still in this terrible black hole of Russian empire that struggles for the territory of its influence. So what was crucial for me that I noticed this beginning of the Second World War, so it was 1939, no, 1941, as I used to see in some museums for last decades. It's like a clear situation. It was first the aggression of Nazi Germany, then the Russian or Soviet Empire, and then Yalta that decided what will happen to our territories with its global changes. Why am I saying all of this instead of introducing a program that I'm running right now in Gdańsk that was named Free Word, also in the gesture of solidarity with Wolne Słowo in Kharkiv, which we still hear with its broken glasses, because I'm always like keen in terms avant-garde and in the colonial perspective. And Ukraine, the colonial perspective has great writers and investigators, not only in the field of contemporary art, but also in literature. I will name only Oksana Zabushko and Mykoła Ryabczuk, but also a great study made by a group of Ukrainian researchers in 2020 called Feminist Art History in Ukraine, why there were great women artists in Ukraine. So this range of topics of decolonizing of its own history of art is very strong. But what I wanted to say that we have a lot of influences both from West and East. And when I think that we use the term decoloniality, which is of course very dense and deep, we also making some shortcuts because actually maybe we should like think about other terms, because the term decoloniality was very often used in Soviet Union. And when I took a very interesting essay of Belarusian essayists and writer Sokrat Janowicz, who was living in Poland, I saw the essay about the Belarus as a colony of Soviet Union. And all issues were very actual to our contemporary discourse. And I thought, how is it possible that this is so actual? It was written in 1980, and it was written under the communist regime in Poland during the Soviet Union, which was really like strong country yet. And I think that it's also about the imperial knowledge and about the imperial way of constructing very strong notions that we are still using. Why is it so strong? Because the Soviet legacy was never judged. And I think that this exhibition, which is very beautiful, and it has this terrible context of war in Ukraine, has also this context of repression over Ukrainian intelligentsia. But it was not only repression on Ukrainian intelligentsia, it was also a repression of intelligentsia of all Soviet republic, Georgia, Armenia. I believe that the Estonian, Latvian intelligentsia was also killed around 1937 because it was like mass repression. And still, that kind of rhetoric that was constructed in Soviet Union and was very influential in leftist circles of intelligentsia in Paris and also maybe in America are not redefined. I think it's time to think that we are using the language which is not transparent, that the language is also rooted in certain kind of politics, and we should be very careful with the repetition of this language. I don't mean that we don't have to redefine imperial knowledge that comes from Russian Empire and from Soviet Union, because we do, and this is super important. But we should not step into the paths that were built in 17th when the Eastern and Western world didn't have these tools we have right now of empathy, of thinking about the victims, about the other knowledge that we have to look for. That's why I was so fascinated by your program of horizontal investigation, which was also promoted by Piotr Piotrowski from Poznań. But what I really liked about him, that he was a bad boy all the time. So, for example, one of his first book about avant-garde from 90s, it was, I believe, 1993. It was about the responsibility of avant-garde, responsibility for the politics that they were supported then. Of course, it was 20s. Then they were victim, but still they were a part of certain political program that killed them afterwards. But they were fascinated by the possibility it was given to them. So. Not to be too many words spoken, I will just say that it's fascinating field to discuss about.
So hi from me too. I'm very glad and happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation, Ieva and Brigitta. So thinking about decoloniality and some of these topics, I want to mention first that it's been the past 3 years, more or less, that have been brought to me a series of conversations with Ukrainian colleagues, art historians, and it's been very enriching to somehow start to see some of the developments in Estonia in context. So think about parallels and various forms of influences and connections with new eyes. And I think this is also what the exhibition, in the framework of which we are having this discussion, allows to do. So yeah, it's been a wonderful way to think about our culture just as well, and ask new questions about it. Yeah, so in the beginning of this year, two colleagues, Liisa German and Olja Balashova, were in the Estonian Academy of Arts as guest scholars, and were also giving courses about Ukrainian art history. And it led to very interesting conversations for us, and thinking about parallels and influences. And yeah, the reason I bring these conversations up is because often these are the best moments of learning, that you actually engage with someone and can go deeper into reflecting on heritage. But as far as decoloniality is concerned, I kind of share the skepticism of Anna that you brought out, because if we are to take this term and concept as something, through which we are thinking and reflecting about our culture and the various forms of imperial colonial legacies, we really need to fill it with new meaning. Because now it was very interesting, this Polish-Russian reference that you brought out, but now what is commonly used, as it's commonly used in conversations, still refers to Western forms of colonial influence overseas, so rather far away from our experience. I mean, you were asking, Ieva, also about kind of moments or examples of where, of it being applied or where it worked. Or has been acted, then as the first thing I have to think about our project, Communicating Difficult Past, which has been a lot about conversations and bringing people together from different disciplines, different countries, to discuss histories of violence or like terminology that we use to talk about silenced subjects. And I'm very happy that the exhibition will be coming to Tallinn as well. So this is a way of sharing some of this work that has not been that much seen in Estonia. I guess I'll leave it here.
Yeah, I think all of you mentioned that it's that there is always this risk of getting kind of trapped in some terms which are not questioned, and of course questioned enough, or some which are start to be used as kind of common sense or common terms, and of course decoloniality has this risk, and it makes me also to remember that there is this very important essay. I think it was written in some 10 years ago, in 2000 early 10s, titled "Decoloniality is not a metaphor," and it was, unfortunately I can't remember right now the name of the authors, but it was these were South American researchers who were applying it to really more ecological or environmental context, and but it somehow has become very seminal also in a much wider cultural circles, especially because this decoloniality has become quite often also a metaphor. We want to decolonize museums, we want to decolonize educational institutions, and almost like everything. But it's exactly as Margaret, you mentioned that there's always this need to question what. In every kind of specific situation, what exactly this would include, and then one search would be to really to look for new perspectives, new points of view, how we can look on the same things. For example, the most banal question would be Kazimir Balevich, to look on him as it's been always written in Western Museum as Russian artist, or as artist whose identity is actually very, very, very complex, because of course we also cannot say that he's just Ukrainian artist or like just Polish artist. But yeah, sorry for this very banal example, but I would like also to reflect a little bit more about exactly like these complexities, both in context of arts and avant-garde art or neo-avant-garde art, which is also, of course, very interesting story. Whereas, for example, Moscow conceptualism, or would be Soviet non-conformist art, which is very often also very much centered around Russian artists, so to speak, Russian artists, which are at the end turn out as very much more diverse identities, and even like in context of the current political realities, it's more like an anecdotal example, but it really kind of stays with me that exactly how often these meanings are simplified if they are looked on from I don't know, either far away distance, or exactly like this Western perspective, or perspective which has maybe the view which is not questioned enough. And this anecdotal example was when in February war started, or this full-scale war started in Ukraine. Then everyone was trying to act somehow like how this solidarity could be shown with Ukraine. And like this example comes from Paris, from French Art History Institute, which was also trying to adapt their very, I should say, colonial program to the currencies. But what they did, they organized exhibition on Moscow conceptualism, because that was the understanding, like how this voice against mainstream Russian culture probably can be verbalized. But the question would to all of you would be like, how you think about this? How would you see this? Not solution, but somehow way out of not losing the complexity of our region, both in arts or in a broader perspective, broader cultural context, and still to have these solidarities or comparative or comparisons or parallels or dialogues. Even like, for example, when we like Anna, you are coming from Poland. We are here in Tallinn. I can probably bring much more perspective from Riga, from Latvia, and Katerina from Ukraine. And we very often use the term Eastern Europe, but then when we look on the researches, then for example, post-Soviet region is not included. Also, about previously mentioned Piotr Piotrowski in his seminal book. And In the Shadow of Yalta is actually is completely like he's even starting with saying that, oh, it's too complicated. I'll skip the Soviet histories. So how to deal with these complexities, not simplifying them, and still trying to have in one kind of picture. Of course, question again is super broad, but if you could reflect on maybe some either art projects, exhibitions, or some more concrete examples where you would see this appearing, this complexity, which is which has the risk of being embraced in one to general view, or but still kind of showing that this is not always the best maybe solution.
I think if we are to see the notion and the idea of decoloniality as merely the question of changing the museum labels, and I mean I understand it's a kind of simplification, but it's also, we can take it as an example, then definitely not, because flipping label and writing an artist as not a Russian but a Ukrainian or Estonian or Polish, it's a separate question, we can discuss it, but it's definitely not kind of the core of the idea of decoloniality. But very interesting point that Anna brought here is a point about language and how language can be contaminated and then maybe decontaminated. Because what Soviet Union managed to do very successfully is contaminate the language to the extent that people, for example, of my generation, I mean, the people who used to hear and use this language while we're still at school, were so allergic to the notions like emancipation, solidarity, feminism, liberation. I mean, you hear this word and you start to sort of, shake. It's like, what is that? It's a similar thing as like with 8th of March, for example. Is it a problem with the idea of a day of a solidarity of women, like manifested? Doesn't mean it's one day, right? But it's the day when it's manifested. It's a day when we can show it. Or is it the problem that the Soviet Union, especially in its later history, managed to completely shallow it to exactly one day a year when women would be given flowers and celebrated as mothers? Goodbye. So when we think about the contamination of language, we should also think maybe we should decontaminate it. I was also struck by one example. I went to Kiev this summer, and I haven't been there for 2 years actually, so before beginning of full-scale invasion. And I saw that one of the streets I used to live on, I lived in different places in Kiev, was a street named after Patrice Lumumba. Those, again, who lived a bit in Soviet Union, I mean, Patrice Lumumba is like, what the fuck is this guy? Like, why is he everywhere? Patrice Lumumba is one of the key names of an African anti-colonial movement. He's one of the founding fathers of the liberation in Africa. He's a absolutely kind of key name, not only of the Congolese history, but of African history in general. Does it mean he's not important at all for us because the Soviet Union twisted it and tried to help a bit when he was asking for help in 1961, but not really, and then he was assassinated, and then the Moscow took his name and named the university after it, and then under the flag of Patrice Lumumba we're educating generation of African leaders. Maybe that's an open question, I don't know, but in Kiev the street of Patrice Lumumba is a Jan Pavel II street now. That's the decolonization. So what I think is that being very conscious and careful about how we talk about coloniality or decoloniality is very important. But it's also very important to remember that the process of reclaiming, one of the key people writing about decoloniality and kind of post-Soviet context is Madina Tlostanova. And she keeps reminding us that we need to reclaim the notion of decoloniality, not only from where originally started, and again, that's South America, but also from the misuse by the Russia today, by alt-right movements in Europe, because it is being misused. So what do? We just give it away and say, okay, they use it, it's now bad, we don't do anything with it. Or we try to think, okay, what do we do with it and how we use it. In particular, Ukrainian case, and maybe that's also interesting because we have to remember that talking about the shared history or certain shared legacies in the region of, let's say, former Soviet countries or wider, Central Eastern Europe, or Central Eastern Europe plus former Soviet countries, which probably includes also Central Asia, right? Maybe South Caucasus. So how far do we go? When we talk about the similarities, do we also, again, remember about the differences? Because this is also very important. And when Ukrainian kind of intellectual and cultural community started repeatedly using the notion of decoloniality after the beginning of full-scale invasion, I think first was also a mess, just using it as a synonym of a anti-colonial struggle. But then, at least what I see in exhibitions, in the work of artists, let's say, but more than that, the notion of decoloniality became very real and very practical, although I think sometimes, I don't know, kind of subconsciously connected to the origin of a notion. Because again, decoloniality is about ruining hierarchies. It's about knowledge structures and knowledge production. And the part of kind of a regional decolonial idea, again, South America, 1990s, fall of the Berlin Wall, and the South American thinkers, economists, and philosophers start saying, okay, capitalism doesn't really work and bring justice. Communism also doesn't work and bring justice. We just see it in front of our eyes. What do we do with it? How do we restructure it? How do we rethink it? And then one of the thinkers behind the idea of decoloniality, Walter Mignolo, says, okay, we take the core idea of Western rationality. We take René Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and we change it. We take it to where we are and we say, I think from where I am and I do. So the knowledge stops being abstract. It's not owned somewhere else. The knowledge is where I am placed. It's located and it's positioned. I'm always speaking from a certain position. But the wonderful thing about this idea, and how I think it's important always to remember how emancipatory movements are connected, is how decoloniality is connected to feminism. And then Audre Lorde comes, the Black American feminist, and say, and the Black mothers whisper, I feel, therefore I'm free. And what Ukrainian artists were doing from the beginning of full-scale invasion, they were reclaiming the power of feeling. They were talking, okay, objective knowledge, that's okay. That's for you people privileged living in peace. But the knowledge is here and now. It's painful, it's scary, but it's also very powerful. It brings a lot of liberation, and that's what we are doing as artists today. The art that we're creating, that's evidence to the atrocities that are happening around us. It's full with embodiment. It's very physical, it's very material, and it's also very emotional. And don't expect us to be objective. This is not how knowledge is created. Here and now, there's no objectivity. There's very radical, deep subjectivity. And that's a Ukrainian experience of decoloniality, which might not be relevant when we talk about the region in general, but maybe in certain parts, it can be. And then we have to find where we negotiate on this and how we can find maybe decoloniality also in the process, because we're just doing it, right? We just, in a way, started. How we grow at different angles to it. And maybe there will be many. I don't know yet.
Thank you, Kateryna. It is really important, topics that you touched, and so many of them are close to the way I am thinking. That it would be nice to develop them, showing context, Polish, Ukrainian, European, and global South plus Africa. But I'm afraid that we don't have enough time to do this, so allowed me to express some thoughts about this question you asked, Eva. The questions are great. It's hard to cut ourselves to not to say too much. But what I really like, what you, Kateryna, said, was about this spoiled notions like feminism, like decoloniality, like equality. And it's really something very important which is not seen in West. That words that are sounding, that looks the same, means completely something else in Russian context, in post-Soviet context, and in post-socialist context. For example, Katarzyna Stańczak-Wiślicz prepared a very interesting book about the women experience in Poland after 1945. And it was the book constructed of several essays, where she investigated how it was possible that Poland, which gave the women's right for voting in 1918, became an anti-feminist country. Because actually it is right now with our ruling party and the women who are dying in the hospitals because of lack of rights for the abortion. It was like the moment when the topic feminism was covered by the violence. So it was not about the emancipation. It was about the using certain words and hiding with these words oppression. That was oppression against the sex, against the equal rights, and all the dictionary that we have to invent anew if we would like to think about our new forces that we have to build around our society. So what I wanted to express is that the words that sounds the same doesn't mean the same in the different cultural context, and especially in the post-Soviet country, because they were stilled. And the other thing which is really interesting, that still we have kind of domination of Western knowledge in global circulation of knowledge. And for example, I had a very interesting debate in the Museum of Ethnography in Warsaw. We were discussing the book of Ewa Klekot, another great theoretician. She was writing about constructing the naive art notion. And when we were discussing, young scientists started to ask the question, what was the influences of trading of slaves onto Polish economy. And it was like the basic question that that person brought from Western universities. She didn't have like this reflection that the main oppressor here was Russian Empire, that it was the main source of like taking away the freedom, the lands and the resources and labor and so on and so on. So what is important also is to like show this Eastern European perspective to the global agenda, because it's still there is still lack of the representation of what what our part of Europe experienced. That knowledge is not written properly yet. We need to do much more than it happened before. And now the third element is like the examples of art that answers these questions of decoloniality. I was working in the Museum of Art in Łódź, a very noble museum that was established by artists in 1930. Probably most of you know this institution. The former director, who was like a very interesting intellectual curator, was, it's probably hard to say about this, sorry for for like mixing thoughts. So the previous director was taken away, and the new person came to be the ruling person in the Museum of Art in Łódź. And he decided like to change this emancipatory discourse that was so powerful and so interesting for our part of the Europe. And what was the reflection? That the institution of museum is oppressive somehow, when it has like a good staff and people and crew who can work with the sophisticated topics, everything is fine. But when they are changing, the museum can turn into a tool of the oppression. That's what I wanted to say. I'm often visiting Ukraine. I cannot stop myself, so I am going there every moment when I have a chance. This year I was already like 1, 2, 3, 4 times, both as volunteer and also as a friend who wanted to see some vibrant cultural life in Ukraine. And what was one of my most important like experience in Kyiv, it was the exhibition Tymczasem w domu Hanenki. In the meanwhile, in the house of Hanenki, it's Museum of Hanenkos is a museum in the center of Kyiv, based on the collection of 19th century. And people who gathered in this exhibition was Ukrainian artist, male artist. The curator was Kateryna Lipkind, female curator. And she said that it's not time for feminism now, because men are so fragile that she has to take care about them. So she gave all the floor to the male artist. Of course, it was controversial. Probably I would do something else. But it was like her moment, and the people who made the decision was the one who were taking care about this museum when the Russian missiles caused this broken glass in Hanenko Museum from end of the 19th century. But what was the exhibition? This exhibition was amazing, interesting, and the real decolonial. For example, they found a place not only for the gesture of solidarity and the asks about the condition of other Ukrainian museums which are still under the Russian missiles, but they also decided to make laugh on the bourgeois culture of the end of 19th century. So, for example, there was a great work of art of Ukrainian composer Alexei Shmurak, who made kind of musical collage that were ironic to the interior that is very like bourgeois and pathetic. So this moment of the exhibition, which was very like quickly done, very like reactive, showed something amazing, that in the same time you can be empathical, you can take care about yourself, you can take care about the other museums in Ukraine, but in the same time you can be critical towards the cultural heritage, that you can observe your own privilege. So this exhibition was a great example for me, and I would recommend everyone to read about it and to look for the picture, because it's something that really changed the system. Being in the same time anti-museum is pro-museum, and this diversity, this like balancing between critic and empathy is amazing. I will not tell you about my program in Gdańsk, which is also decolonial, because I would speak too much, so thank you.
Can I make a very, very quick comment that I think this is a very feministic exhibition, actually, because it's done with a lot of care, a lot of solidarity and support to those who in this situation are in more danger, who are more fragile. So I think she did a great feministic work, actually, with this exhibition.
Yes, you are right. You are right. It was about caring. It was about this like feminist practice, but there was no women artists.
which also shows us that feminism is also, it has a different sides. It's not only about women, it's also about what women can do. That's a different discussion, probably.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's anti-feminist, but that there was this few notions of Kateryna Lipkind that it's a time for taking care about men. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to come back to language because it was kind of one of the starting points, and something really resonated when thinking about this contamination of language. Because, one of the things that decoloniality is also about is starting to name and call phenomena in our histories with their right words. And this is, I think, that with which collaboration is really crucial, because we can see these phenomena better than in our own bubble, national bubble and framework. Because let's be honest, art history has been a very nationally bound, framed discipline, and is until now. We are starting in different ways to break away from it, but there's so much more, so much further to go, another thing that I had to think about is related to this these labels, museum labels that you also mentioned. Is a suggestion by the artist and exhibition maker Andrei Boyarov, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but he suggested to add not names but in one language, but the different languages through which and with which the artist identified themselves. So in case of some artists, it can be 3 different forms of spelling and writing the name. So I think this is a very productive way of thinking, about museum labels, just as well in the form of knowledge and where this knowledge comes from. So these culturally embodied positions. And with this reference of Lumbumba, I had to think about. So Estonian President Lennart Meri very famously said in the early 90s that we have to stay Estonians but also become Europeans. It's a slogan which is often reiterated. And a literary critic, Märt Väljataga, about a year ago, wrote a piece saying that we also have to become Africans. And I really like this, this thought, this sentiment behind it.
This morning, at this discussion about possible solidarities with, the global South, one of the topics, or one of the kind of challenges, was precisely this, because Ukraine is fighting to be part of Europe for European values against the barbarity and cruelness of the Asian Russian state. How many solidarities can we build out of that? Probably not very many, which means also questioning. And for Ukraine, it's a huge question, because Ukraine is being kind of politically and also socially moved, towards EU, towards Europe as an idea, at least since Euromaidan, which is 10 years. And now asking ourselves, as cultural actors, as intellectuals, but also as a society, what does it actually mean? Do we understand what is this Europe which is today? What does it stand on? What is it made of? Who made it? And if we talk about European values, aren't they human values? Maybe we should actually, again, language thing, we should rename them. We should give them the name that they actually truly possess, because the dignity and freedom and democracy and whatever we can bring, that's human. Everybody should have it. So yeah, in this being also African and Central Asian and everything.
And I would actually, what Kateryna, you mentioned previously, that for Ukrainian artists, currently decoloniality is very much related with subjectivity, not just with knowledge as objective knowledge production or knowledge deconstruction as objective information, whatever it could be, but what really concerns empathy, feelings, and like really perception, which is happening through almost like body, and I think it's very interesting, and yeah, maybe also this is what you mentioned, that maybe for at that sense this the term decoloniality can have also different meanings. For example, for artists who are experiencing war in their home, and for someone who just reads it in a newspapers. So this question of subjectivity and arts, and that sense also like arts, how much this, I would develop it even further on, how much does it include through this gaze of decoloniality aesthetical and political meanings. And here again I want to refer to example which I just remember in context of current political situation. Anna, I think you mentioned that you've been translating Oksana Zabushko's works, or at least been Oksana Zabushko's works. You've been also translating them into Polish. Yeah, so she's definitely one of the amazing artists, writers who also came across my field of knowledge and information. Of course, I didn't know her before, and then her name came across because we are translating currently her very recent essay, "The Longest Journey," which was written in the early months of when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started. And then she starts with this, I will very kind of roughly quote her, that she went to Warsaw for her book launch tour, and then she returned only several months after. And then she was approached by her Italian publisher saying that can she write a text, an essay where she would explain the complex history of Ukraine for Westerners. And then she said that she's not able to write like Timothy Snyder, who is a great messenger of Ukrainian history, of course, to the Western public. And instead she writes this Longest Journey, which is very personal, very also emotional work of art, where exactly like even like grammatical inconsequences are part of the strongness of the text. And this kind of maybe a bit complicated connection, but this is, I think, power of art, both in literature and or in visual arts. And but exactly like this, there's not like straightforward perception of information, but it has like this political and aesthetical layers intertwine, and sometimes they're very subjective, and sometimes they show paradoxes, and paradoxes also of our region, where we exactly like already mentioned that that sometimes what the meanings of some terms in Africa or in South America can mean something else than here, and we all have been in this very short but very informative also tour Elnara brought us. And could you reflect about this power of artworks, both political and aesthetical, maybe through the prism of this exhibition? I think for Kateryna and probably Anna, this might be different because this is the context you know very well, much less than, for example, me. But just in a way, I'm asking this: could you reflect about this through this current exhibition, through this exhibition? In that way, maybe this very vague layers, in a way, trying to be more concretize. Of course, you don't have to. I'm not asking you to refer to the exact artists which we see here, but maybe I think it is a good example how this political and aesthetical intertwines. Also, like for example, what these ideas meant in early 20s and what happened maybe 10 years later, and how we look on these artworks today. I think it all is very complicated.
Don't look at me. Somebody else can start.
Maybe
now.
we can shift. But I don't know who would like to start.
It's so difficult question.
It can be just reflection,
okay,
which
so
doesn't
maybe
have to.
Like a few points. I was living in Ukraine, in Kyiv, for 7 years, and a lot of these artworks are so close to my memories, and I remember them from the walls of National Art Museum in Hrushevskoho Street. So for me, this exhibition was not only like presenting something that is Ukrainian avant-garde, but also kind of sentimental journey. But avant-garde is not sentimental. Avant-garde is not about the emotion. Avant-garde is about the progress. But I still can feel that kind of sentiment. And I think about avant-garde that was destroyed by the Soviet Union, not only by killing the artists, per se killing them in Sandarmoch next to Sołowki, but also by destroying their artworks. And we know a lot about the Entartate Kunst that was destroyed or sold by Nazi Germany. But I believe that in global context, again, we don't have this feeling that this interesting avant-garde was destroyed by the state where this avant-garde was present, was created. And we can look at these amazing works of art also because of brave workers of museum that were hiding these works in the basements of art museum and in private collection, and their decision was very difficult because if somebody would find it, they would be killed as well. So I think about this like a great struggle for culture. And again, what I like about this exhibition is that it shows this amazing enthusiasm of 20s, this belief in progress, but we don't have this, or maybe we do have this like conclusion. We all hear this broken glass from Budynok Słowa, House of Word, and maybe this is the conclusion of the situation of avant-garde in Ukraine. That what was not destroyed in 20s and in the 30s is destroying right now, but Ukrainians are struggling, they are fighting for their cultural heritage. And the culture is also the field of struggle. Culture is also political. We cannot see the collapse of avant-garde. We cannot see this moment of social realism that will cover all the conflicts that are present in the avant-garde art. And what I also like about the Kumu, because you don't hide your social realisms. I saw there a great canvas when Estonian army is talking with Lenin and Stalin, and it's on your main exhibition. That means that you can discuss about this, that you are not going to hide it. But when I think about this exhibition, is also a lot of questions of belief in future, of believing in the possibilities that the world can be changed, and the artists are the actors of this change. I do believe that it's true, but I think that when we are going to the politicians are elected. artists are not elected. They are elected themselves. And this is a great space of freedom, but also responsibility. And what I like about Ukrainian artists, that they observe their privilege, that they are critical towards themselves as this, that person who are dealing with this very sophisticated sphere of symbolic and visual representation. And it is also the role of culture to be critical, self-conscious. And I think that this exhibition is also about it. So I'm very happy that I could take a look at amazing construction, which is showing in your museum.
It's not that my question was, I meant that you asked to reflect about the artworks exactly which are here. Maybe it brings you some other thoughts about this power of art. I don't know. We can put it so.
I mean, yeah, for me, like I mentioned, there was in the beginning of the year this course that these two Ukrainian art historians held in the Estonian Arts Academy. So this is like a fantastic way to see the original pieces of some of the works and artists they were talking about. So there was a lot of, warm recognition and encounter like these personal encounters that it has, of course, brought. But for me too, this piece with the broken glass really resonates in the sense that it's a very powerful enactment of thinking about violence and how to transmit it, and how to somehow honor, these lives broken just at the height of their careers and their creative, powers. So yeah, I think it's one of the most powerful pieces I've come to see, reflecting on this historical violence that there are so much of in our histories and in our region. And the connection with what is happening now, of course, only strengthens its appeal.
I was listening to you, and especially, Anna, your story about the workers of national art museums saving artworks, and I was thinking about the two parallel stories that happened basically at the same time, in a certain way connected to this exhibition. And one story has literally nothing to do with this exhibition, but with this time, and that's a story of the British artist and designer David King, who, as an artist and as a photographer, was traveling to Soviet Union throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and through his private connections in Moscow and Leningrad, then St. Petersburg, he was buying different artifacts. Starting from the beginning of the century, the first artifact in the collection is a photography of a Khodynka massacre, so it's 1905, and then till the years just past Stalin's death, 1955. I don't know why he was interested in this period, but so he was buying photography, posters, books, prints, different kind of memorabilia connected to this kind of a pre-revolutionary moment, and then sort of avant-garde modernism, and then Stalin collapse, war. Death of Stalin. It's an immense collection of, I think, 250,000 objects, which is in London. So he brought it with himself in London, and then before the end of his life, which is a few years ago, he gave it as a permanent loan to Tate Modern. So all that he collected and acquired, not very legally, because this is not something which was legally sold or like legally owned in Soviet Union at that moment. He brought to London, gave to the museum, and then the museum, celebrating the centenary of October Revolution, which was called Russian Revolution in this case, made an exhibition which was called Red Star over Russia, exhibiting this memorabilia. This is a bit about the time, also a bit about, decoloniality, coloniality. At the same time as, the British guy was collecting and buying things in Moscow and St. Petersburg, Leningrad, a Ukrainian person, a Ukrainian collector, was sometimes buying and sometimes just getting as a present original artworks of mostly Ukrainian, but not only, some European artists also, which the collectors in the Soviet Union, his friends, he was part of the very kind of artistic milieu. They didn't want, because it was too dangerous. And also, most of the works that he acquired didn't belong to the names that were easily kind of rationalized and put, on the title. So, Malevich was not super popular in the late Soviet Union, but, he was still a name. And it was profitable to, have Malevich as a Russian artist. But the majority of artists that are here were not really. So he was collecting these works, also half legally. And when he died, about 10 years ago, a bit more, his collection, this semi-legal collection of the not wanted works, of something which was of a secondary importance, maybe, by the ratings of a big empire. And that became a gift to Mstetsky Arsenal. And the part of his collection, his works are here also, and you can see it. So for me, it's an interesting story about how the worth and the value of the artworks is being built. Where does it come from? Who makes it? And how it changes in time and depending on the political context. And this is also the political power of artists and works, and how they can transcend time and political circumstances and then come up as something important and very vocal. And another little thing which I was thinking, walking also through this exhibition and our discussion today, that very important part of this exhibition is that it's, of course, it's based mostly on the visual artists and the visual works, but the idea behind this is this multiplicity and multidisciplinarity of an avant-garde and modernism in general, right? So it's not only about visual arts, or not about only paintings or the graphics. It's also, you see embroidery done by this is retake, but originally done by kind of simple men and women from the village. But it's also movie. It's also theater. It's also architecture. It's everything. And as we're talking now, behind us there is this video where two people, apparently a male and female, are reading poetry of Mihailo Semenko, who is here on the photography, this cute man. And you see only lips and the voice. And I didn't know, because I haven't seen this work before. I haven't seen it in Kiev. But I, in a moment, recognized both people. I know them very well from the Kiev artistic circles. And this is a very important, I think, part of the artistic life in Ukraine, especially now. But of course, it didn't start just now, but especially now during the full-scale invasion, that everything and everybody is so much connected. And this life is very multidisciplinary and also local. So all the different, cities and different places all over Ukraine are so much connected. Unfortunately now also because of a displacement, but not only. And this makes what happens in Ukraine nowadays, I mean, in the artistic sense, an artistic circle, in a way also very avant-garde-like, plus the political power and political sentiment that Anna was describing. I completely agree. This knowledge and this belief that world can be changed and should be changed, and art has a power very, very strong and very present to do that.
Very powerful words. But are there questions from the audience? Or maybe some comments, some reflection on what you...
I just wanted to ask to repeat the name of the exhibition Anna was mentioning.
In Ukrainian it was Tymczasom w domie Hanenkiu. And in English, I believe in the
meantime, in Hanenko House.
In Hanenko House.
If you Google Hanenko Museum on the website, you will see it's their last project, I think.
And I highly recommend the essay of Boris Filonenko about this exhibition.
But I think it's only in Ukrainian. But you can use the Google Translate.
Yeah, I think maybe you do it in Ukrainian. Yeah.
Is there another question from the audience? I actually have one additional question for the panel. So, as during this topic, I was thinking, do you have in mind some kind of museum or exhibition space who is working currently in Eastern Europe and is actively working with the themes of decolonization and when it comes to the artistic and cultural heritage, which would be a positive example? And if you think of it, why? Why is it a positive example and what approaches do they use?
Okay. No, yeah, of course, but I don't. You may say about them. I thought about the Kharkiv Literary Museum, Muzeum Literatury w Charkowie, that is still active. What I like about them, it's their history and their program and their exhibition, which are not about the visuality and not only about literature. I saw few exhibitions of Kharkiv Literary Museum. The last one was in prison in Lviv on Łączkoho, and it was amazing, terrible experience. I am saying terrible because they prepare stands with the quotation of Ukrainian killed writers from 1937, and the stands was directly in the former prison where many people have been killed. So we had like the true architecture of oppression and the small gesture of visual intervention, but mostly directed to reflection. Where are we now? What happened then? What happened in 1937? What is happening right now in 2023, 2022? I will not name all the years, but I could, thinking about the topics which are important to claim. So this was the last exhibition I saw, and the previous, which was really interesting, it was in their museum, the house they're having their activity right now. This museum was invented in 30s in Kharkiv as a representation of vibrant literary society. But of course, most of the people have been killed. It was like killed Renaissance. Many of contemporary Ukrainian writers use the term of second killed Renaissance. We can name only Victoria Amelina, who was killed in Kramatorsk a few weeks ago, and many others, Serhiy Vakulenko, and so on and so on. But what I wanted to say, the building of the Kharkiv Literary Museum is the former hotel for Secret Service. So it's again very specific building, the building which tells its own story. But what they are doing, that they do not try to like hide this history. They are trying to build the responsibility towards the past. And the exhibition about the censorship they proposed was really amazing because it was censorship that was about everyday life, about the censor made on what we want to express, but also political censorship. And there was no answer. So the viewer is not the one who has to be trained. The viewer is responsible and have to invent its own answer to this question. And the second institution, I will say it, please come to Gdańsk. We are having our project on Długa 35, and this location, Długa 35, is in the hand of Gdańsk, the City of Literature program, since March 2022. Before, there was Russian House of Culture and Science. Before, there was Polish-Soviet Society of Friendship. Before, it was the Office of Rebuilding Gdańsk. Before, the house was distracted by Russian Soviet army, by Red Army, and before it was medieval building. So we try to work with all these layers in the context of war in Ukraine. Thank you.
So exhibition making is often slow, much too slow, to follow the pace of actual events around us. So in my mental map, I think it would be Latvian Center for Contemporary Art, who is doing really amazing work in organizing discussions and events and actually bringing people together to think and reflect. So I do want to mention that, but I think it's also about people and about single people who are behind these processes. So it's not often about institutions per se, but these driving forces that take up initiative. And I mean, Kumu's exhibitions on the Anthropocene, or there has been another exhibition on art and science, which I believe will be up in Tartu in the coming year. So these are also really fascinating examples of bringing different forms of material together to think about knowledge, its creation, and how art has participated in it. I don't know if this answers, but this is what I can offer.
I can only agree the most about the power of people, because I think it's also one thing in the moment, I mean, about Ukraine in particular, but not only, is that it's not always big institutions that sort of set the agenda. Mostly, and again, in Ukraine in particular today, it's people in smaller initiatives, sometimes very kind of pop-up grassroots initiatives that do something, disappear, regroup, build networks that bring the most kind of change and the most knowledge and the most also support in this situation. And also the liaison and the communication from, everything which is happening outside of Ukraine, also because the travel and the access is so complicated. So I think the power of people is very important.
Eva?
Yes, by the way.
No, but I would agree with Kateryna that it's, and especially when I think also all this discussion, it's like the Ukraine, of course, is at the core of our thoughts, and exactly like these are people like Lia and Andrei Deslievs, who started on Facebook this page about the coloniality in arts and culture, or Svetlana Berdaeva, actually the art historian through which I learned about Kateryna's text, who is also like. Actually, people from art historians become activists and political workers, we could even say, and of course, in that sense, they are much more flexible. Exactly like as you said, that art institutions sometimes they're a bit like heavy animals who move very slowly, and instead, individual people are much more quicker and flexible. And surprisingly, but also can manage to really, to change things, to approach people, to approach our knowledge, and indeed, I would agree with that.
Thank you everyone for these answers. Unfortunately, it seems that we are now running out of time. So in this moment, we have to end our discussion. Thank you for very interesting thoughts, all the participants, and thank you for the audience who came here and listened to us. Thank you.